Hello and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Damlola Ogunshakin. Let's go straight to the front pages of the dailies. I'm starting with Vanguard. Vanguard is leading with federalism at grassroots. 70 states run 323 local government areas with caretaker committees. Parties breaches Section 7 of Constitution. Anambra, Imo, Borno, others emerge as worst states. Northeast was it with 91 of 112 local government areas affected. Southeast follows with 65 of 95 local government eats. Northwest emerges best with 149 of 186 local government under democracy. We have peculiar circumstances in the country that's coming from Norjay. Aggrieved the councils should go to courts. NGF source is saying that Himo we owed local government poll this year is coming from Uzodima. Governors carried out coup against local government areas. Agbakoba is saying that, and Akwane says democracy not working at local government areas. You can see that on page 5. And here's a picture showing President Bola Ahmed Tinubu yesterday as he met with the President of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Mohammed bin in Abu Dhabi, secured a deal which led to immediate removal of the visa ban placed on Nigerian travelers. And you can see that story on page 9. And here on page 17, we have the quote from Adibe. On page 13, brain drain, some department and teaching hospitals shutting down. MDCAN raises alarm. On sports, indeed, sure Eagles will qualify for 2026 World Cup. You can see that on page 31. On page 8, foreign rescuers join Morocco quake raise as death toll is 2,862. On page 6, federal government won't introduce new taxes. Presidential committee saying that. Stories above. On page 8 still, Zenith Bank gross earning jump 139% to 967.3 billion naira in first half of 2023. On page 9, expelling Wike from PDP, a tax that must be done. Articles Camp is saying that funding federal government will grant varsities full autonomy. That's coming from Minister. UPA Foundation launches a 2023 National Essay Competition. And lastly, on the front page of Vanguard newspaper, doyen of accounting, Akitola Williams, died at 104. Now, away from there, we move to the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian is leading with cautious optimism as federal government adopts a piecemeal negotiation out of $800 million stock fund. You can see that on page 6. And stories below. On page 5, 78,000 Nigerians die yearly from cancer. Nigeria's microfinance banking dream on brink of failure. 2.9 billion naira NDDC fraud, aid to ex-MD, two others bag a 6-year jail term. End of an era in accounting profession as Akintola Williams bows out. 7 dies, cause injuries in Cross River Benue dispute. You can see that on page 10. Now the Punch. Punch is leading with Tinubu special investigator fought CBN audited reports. Central Bank allegedly pays over 400 million naira to IFRS Academy for accounting guidelines. DSS to summon FRC boss, top directors as CBN special investigator deepens probe. You can see that on page 2. And the stories below on page 12, we have corruption, biggest hindrance to Nigeria's democratic development as coming from the global report. Court remands jealous lover for killing girlfriend. You can see that on pages 4 and 5. Stories above, operators excited as UAE lift visa ban on Nigerians. Pengasan reacts as Dangote refinery misses production deadline. You can see that on page 17 of the Punch newspaper. And lastly, let's look at the Guardian. Lastly, let's look at the Nation newspaper. The Nation is leading with mixed fortunes for APC, PDP, Labour are tribunals. Lalong wins the senatorial seats. Labour Party rep saddened in Abia. Plateau governor triumphs. Gaya fails to obtain NNPP victory. And Oboreveri heads for Supreme Court. You can see that on page 4. 11 feared killed in Plateau. You can see that on page 27. Devastating storm kills one in Libya. You can see that on page 8. And stories above. federal varsities to get a full financial autonomy. You can see that on page 5. Education to take a budget 25%. Edo relocates Shaibu's office outside government hours. Lastly, on the front page of the Nation newspaper, Zenith Bank makes 967 billion naira half-year gross earnings. You can see that on page 7 of the Nation newspaper. And that's all we have on the front pages of the dailies this morning. Join us after the break for the analysis. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Today the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Damlola Okunshaki. Joining me to analyze the front pages of the dailies this morning is Mr. Dayo Akintobi. He's the publisher of Ilukweju Today, Lekki Today, and Ikeja GRA Today. Good morning, Mr. Dayo.
Good morning, Damilola. Good morning to all our viewers. I understand it's a very wet morning in Lagos today.
Yes, it is. Well, let's move straight to the front pages of the dailies, and we're starting with the story of the local government. As Nigerians struggle to deepen our democracy, no fewer than 17 state governments are running their local councils with transition or caretaker committee. What do you think about this fact? Because according to reports, it seems democracy is not working in some of these local governments.
Well, this is actually a rape on democracy, to tell you the truth. Governors have subsumed the local councils under the state. And even though as far back as, I think it was 2014 or 2016, a law was passed that the local governments should get their allocations directly from the federation account. The state governors still find a way to circumvent this. The problem with this whole idea is this: the local council chairmen and councillors are elected by the will of the people. No state governor should have the right to just sack them and essentially replace them with people of his own choosing. That subverts the will of the people and rubbishes the notion of democracy completely. And what makes it even worse is that the local government is the closest to the people. The local government has the most direct impact on our daily lives in terms of living in our communities. And if the will of the people is not allowed to prevail in how the local councils are run.
Yes. This idea of the state government having control over local government, both their funds, their personnel, their infrastructure, it is unknown to the Constitution. It's an aberration. And I think the National Assembly tried to address that some years back, either in 2014 or 2016, by passing legislation that required the state government, that required the local governments to receive their funds directly from the federation account. But the state governors have still made an end run around that and still find a way to dip their hands in the cookie jar and take whatever they want out of council funds. And of course, because the governor has the wherewithal to sack the council chairman and put in his caretaker committees, that has made the councils completely emasculated. They have little or no say at all, which is a big shame because they have the most direct impact on our daily lives. This is definitely not democracy at its best at all.
But according to information, some of the state governors to be saying that they sacked some of these local government chairmen because of corruption.
Who sacks the state governors when they are corrupt? The hedge against corruption is periodic elections. So if we are aware that the council chairmen are corrupt, it's not for the governor to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. It's not for him. It's for the people to exercise their franchise at the next polls and say, okay, we are aware you are corrupt, so we don't want you in there again. And then law enforcement will now take up the issue of investigating the allegations of corruption. It's not for the governor to take it upon himself and say, oh, because I think you are corrupt or I know you are corrupt, so I'm going to remove you. So who removes the state governor when he is corrupt? So it doesn't work that way. Democracy does not vest all our power in one person. Democracy vests power in the people. So it's only the people that have the right to say, we don't want you there anymore. Yes, there's a mechanism by which a chairman can be removed legally. That is through impeachment or vote of no confidence by his councillors, right? So there is a process. If the people are really agitating against anybody in the council, there's a legal process to remove him, and it doesn't start or end with the governor. That's for sure. Doesn't work that way. They're just truncating democracy by doing that.
Now, among the six geopolitical zones in the Northeast, only one of the six states operates democracy at the grassroots, and that's Adamawa. The other five states, Bauchi, Borno, Gombe, Taraba, and Yobe, don't have elected councils, and this has been going on for a long time. So, for them to be noticing it now, what do you think went wrong?
Well, the notion that one particular geopolitical zone has a heavier concentration of this anomaly goes to show something called the strongman syndrome. It shows that those who are in authority in that geopolitical zone generally are so powerful that nobody can stand up to them or question them. It seems like perhaps in that part of the country, that's the way things are run, is that one person is all powerful and everybody else just kowtows to that person. You don't see it as bad in other regions where power is diffused over a wider spread of people and not so much concentrated in the hands of one person. But for you to see all that particular trend coming out of one geopolitical zone, it reinforces the notion of a strongman syndrome in that geopolitical zone. It might be a cultural predisposition that usually men of substance, men of wealth, men of aristocratic bearing or perhaps nobility, that nobody stands up to them and they're allowed to have their way. Generally, these might be the kind of men who are sent to political office and carry on that cultural predisposition into office to where nobody dares to question them. So they become imperial, they become emperor-like, and they begin to consolidate power, whereby all power resides with them, even in a democracy. And that's the danger, of course, is that that's moving towards autocratic or autocracy. It's moving towards dictatorship. Even at the state government levels, there's still supposed to be a House of Assembly to check the governor. There's supposed to be a local government who is supposed to work in tandem with the deliver. One full import leader arrogates all that power to himself, then it's the people that suffer the most. It's the masses who really get deprived of the dividends of democracy that should accrue to them. So no, it's not the best thing. The problem, of course, is that the National Assembly themselves will not be too predisposed to doing anything about it, because many of them are in that same situation themselves, whereby they are the kingpins in their own little fiefdoms, whereby they exercise maximum power in their own areas of influence, and so they probably won't be too interested in doing anything to change this way of doing things.
Okay, let's move away from that. Recently, federal universities in Nigeria increased their fees, especially that of Unilag that increased theirs by over 800%. Now, the federal government on Monday said that it was determined to initiate a new creative means of funding tertiary education by granting universities the autonomy to explore new sources of financing their activities. What do you think about this step?
Well, it's interesting. It has a good side, it has a positive side and a negative side. Of course, all along we've always complained about the fact that there's not enough funding in education. And the reason for that is because the government has generally always funded tertiary education. Now, when you look at a situation in the country whereby revenue is low, demands are high for expenditure, there's a lot to do, there's not enough money to do it, it's not a time where they can find extra money to fund education. And of course, ASU strike on and on and on. They are not paid enough. There's not enough money to run the university properly. And all that is coming at a time when the federal government doesn't have any extra money to put into education. So what government is saying is, look, why don't we run tertiary education like a business? Why don't you people generate your own revenue, set your own school fees, instead of the federal government being the one to standardized fees in Lagos? Perhaps you should charge more than, say, University of Maiduguri, because the cost of living in Lagos is higher than the cost of living in Maiduguri. So they probably pay more for power, pay more for fuel, pay more for food, pay more for so many things in Lagos than in Maiduguri. So why should they be charging the same amount of money for a student in Maiduguri as a student in Lagos? So what government is saying is, look at your own particular circumstances and cost of living in your own area and adjust your fees accordingly. Then also take the liberty to create revenue through your own way. Like in the old days, we used to have university presses that would do printing, both internal printing and external printing. From there, they will save money. Instead of going out to print exam papers and journals and research papers, instead of going to print them outside, they print them internally, which will save money. Then that will take outside jobs and print and generate revenue for the university. So what the government is saying, yes, is that explore means of generating your own revenue, set your own charges, your own fees according to what works for you, and become autonomous. Don't be dependent on cap in hand to Abuja every month to get allocation, which is not serving, is affecting education. So on that hand, it is good. It is good that they are now being given. I don't think every university can progress at the same pace in different parts of the side of the coin is that can students afford to pay more? You mentioned already that has doubled or tripled its fees. Oh, in the 60s and 70s, I went to university in Nigeria in the 70s. Cover for tuition, and even the dormitories, boarding, lodging were heavily subsidized. We also got bursaries from our respective states to where we practically went to school for free. So I look at it now and I say, for those who can't afford private universities in Nigeria, the families or working class families who can't afford to send their children to very expensive private universities, public universities have been a succor. They've been a way that represents hope for the masses, to where no matter how economically challenged your circumstances are, you still had hope that you could receive a tertiary institution and improve your life, get educated, get a good job, lift yourself out of poverty. The question now is, doing it this way represents an increase in cost to families and to children, to students and all that. But government is trying to mitigate that by creating things like student loans, things like grants and various methodologies to address the funding gap. So all in all, let's see how it plays out. I think it could turn out to be a good thing if it is properly managed.
Yes, but for a university like Unilag, 800% increase after like 15 years is almost too much. Because some of the students, we saw a video that went viral where they were protesting in front of the school gate, and a particular student mentioned that his classmate is in Yaba selling granuts to afford these fees. Now, such a child might have to drop out because of the increase. Do you think the loan can solve all this? Because even the rules put down for the loan seems to be a little bit tough.
Yes, but what is happening now is that government is introducing competition into tertiary institutions, the same way it works with business. So if Unilag has increased by 800%. I am at the liberty to look for a university that has increased by only 100 or 200% and go there. So the point is, there will be different fees at different levels. So there's different affordability. Look, let's not have a sense of entitlement. Yes, okay, so you live in Lagos, or Lagos University has a good reputation. That's where you want to attend. That's your interest. But if you're not able to afford it, you look for other options. Not every university is going to price 800% increase. Not every university has the same cost of living or expenses as expensive as University of Lagos. So you lower your expectations. You look for a different university that has lower fees. That's the beauty of competition. Competition gives us choice. Not everybody will increase by 800%. So you now have to shop around and see which university is offering what suits your pocket, what you can afford. Even the issue of the student's loan, there will probably be variations in interest rates and various terms and conditions of the loan in terms of how many years you have to pay back and things like that, to where you will choose the one that's most applicable or appropriate for your circumstances. Look, what they're essentially saying is, if the universities have autonomy now and they are no longer dependent on the federal government for their own funding, they have to ensure their own survival. So they are no longer a charity. Although my personal belief education should be subsidized by government to some extent. I believe education and health are things that are common goods that everybody needs at one point or the other, and as a result should be subsidized to some extent by government. How government goes about doing that, well, that's a different story entirely. Like I said, there's issues of student loans, there's issues of grants. Maybe because we're just starting with that now, maybe those need to be tweaked a little bit. You complain about the fact that the students' loans are too expensive. Yes, sure, but we're just starting. As we begin to move forward with these things, we'll make adjustments to them that make them palatable for the greater number of students. So let's not worry about it too much. I think at the case of Unilag about the 800% increase, while they are correct to worry, but I think if they take a deep critical approaching the solution, they will see there are better options than protesting, because this is progress at the end of the day. It's trying to move the educational sector forward, help it to be able to accommodate more students, be able to train them better. We've been talking about how much of the outputs from our tertiary institutions are poorly educated. We've been complaining about that. That's because universities don't have enough funding to give them a proper education. So now they've come with a way that universities can get the funding, and we're still complaining. So what do we actually want? That's the thing. What do we actually want? If we want better education, better trained graduates, more intelligent and knowledgeable graduates, then we have to do something about funding, which is what government has done. So let's give them a chance. Let's give it a chance to succeed.
Okay, let's move away from that. The Medical and Dental Consultants Association of Nigeria has raised the alarm over the consequences of brain drain in the nation's health institution, saying some departments in the teaching hospitals are shutting down due to the high rate of brain drain, what we popularly know as JAPA. What's your take on this?
Well, it's not just doctors and dentists. It's a mass exodus of skilled, semi-skilled, and even unskilled workers. If you remember in the news a week or two ago, even one country was saying they're looking for teachers. They're looking for physics teachers. They're looking for English teachers. Please come. A couple of weeks ago, another country was saying, we want carpenters and plumbers. Please come. So it's not limited to doctors and dentists alone. We have a big problem, really, in terms of people being disillusioned with Nigeria and not seeing any hope for the future and seeking greener pastures elsewhere. So we need to look internally to see how we can turn things around within our own circumstances. The truth of the matter is that those who remain in Nigeria today are there simply because they can't afford or pay the money to relocate, because it's not cheap to go. even if you do it through an agent, it's not cheap to go, with airline tickets, visa fees, relocation fees, all kinds of fees involved. It's not 1 or 2 million naira or 3 million naira undertaking. It's very expensive. So those who remain are simply those who can afford to go. If tomorrow they get a windfall that can cover their expenses, they will go too, and we'll have an empty country. So the solution turns back to looking internally to correct the things that are leading to youth disillusionment. What is it that is making people believe that the grass is greener in another country than it is in Nigeria? What are those factors? We've said them over and over again. Lack of employment. When people get out of school, they are not employed. Many businesses are shutting down or have shut down that would employ these people, but they can't afford to continue to operate. Why? It's expensive. There's no power. There's no fuel. There's corruption. There's internal theft. Government policies, ease of doing business is tough. There's so many things that we need to look at holistically and begin to correct, that will now reduce and stem the tide of this Japa syndrome. And the first step is to renew hope. So perhaps the president recognized that fact, is why he tagged his agenda Renewed Hope Agenda, because he knows that people are disillusioned, and he knows that people don't see much hope for the future, and as a result, those who have the means to go will go. And it is more scary that our medical field is the one that is largely, or that is at the front line of in jeopardy. And without health, you can't do anything. You can't work. You can't be productive. You can't have a good life if you don't have health. I think we need to begin to do things in the health sector. Things like improving the pay of doctors, things like investing in hospitals and equipment and medicine. We need the first big thing we need to solve in Nigeria is power. I think if we can resolve the power issue, I think the second one is insecurity. I think if we solve power and we solve insecurity, a lot more people will be less inclined to be seeking greener pastures elsewhere. Because once power is solved, that creates ability to industrialize, it creates ability to manufacture, it creates ability to generate jobs, good paying jobs. So those two things, if we can begin to address them, I'm not saying overnight people will stop leaving, but in the long term, it will turn our fortunes around, and hopefully by that time the country wouldn't have been empty, completely empty of those who have to build the country for the next generation.
Okay, let's end this on a lighter note with Mr. and Mrs. And the first person speaking this morning is Mr. Mr. says, if you have to choose between love and a piece of diamond, you will choose diamond. I don't believe this is coming from you. And Mrs. replied, don't blame me, dear. Love is blind, but diamonds are forever.
Diamonds are forever. That was a James Bond movie, yes. A woman will always appreciate a diamond and choose it over and above everything else. But I like to think my wife would choose me above a diamond anyway. But I understand where Mrs. is coming from. More power to her.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dayo Akitobi, for joining us this morning.
All right. Thank you, Davila, for having me. Good morning, Nigeria.
Yes, and this is where we have to drop the curtain. My name is Dablola Upunshakin. Do well to like and follow us on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. On Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, our WhatsApp number is also displayed on your screen.